If you don't grow food and you want immediate access to medicinal plants, then you're in luck, because most people don't realise it. They already have medicinal plants growing in the garden. They're just disguised as weeds. So today I'm going to show you some of the most common weeds that are in fact medicinal plants. Let's get into the video. So the first medicinal plant that's actually disguised as common weed is stinging nettle. And it's growing wild in my hen pen. In fact, it's taken over a little bit, but I'm not too concerned because I've been picking tons and tons of it and eating it like a green like you'd expect to grow in the garden. I know you're probably thinking now, how am I meant to consume nettle when it stings? Well, you can actually pick it without getting stung, and you can eat it without getting stung, and there's a very simple trick to picking it. Cooking it, simply just steam it for a couple of minutes and the sting is completely gone. You're probably thinking, why would I even go for all the effort of harvesting something like nettle to eat? Well, the health benefits make it a no-brainer. Nettle is actually 4 times higher in vitamin C than an orange gram for gram, which is pretty amazing. I've also heard that it's really good for helping to treat allergies like hay fever. I don't have any allergies, so I don't know if that's actually true, but if you do have an allergy, try nettle and then see if it improves symptoms and let me know in the comments. It'd be really interesting to know. What you want to pick is the top few levels of leaves. So there's a nettle plant. You don't want to go get the lower leaves, because that's when it gets much stringier and harder. It's just not as good to pick. You want to get the fresh shoots at the top, a couple of layers, and you want to touch the stem only. Nettles sting with the tiny little hairs along the stems, but when you brush up slightly, you avoid rubbing into them, so that's how you avoid getting stung. If you touch the leaves or the brush on your hand when you're picking them, you'll get stung, so you have to pinch just underneath the stem and nip it off. So here we go. This here, grab it there like that, pick it like that. So that's a perfect little shoot. You can see we've got a couple of layers of leaves, so you can steam it lightly to take away the sting, or make it into a tea or a soup, however creative you want to get. And you can see I didn't even get stung, or did I? Am I just putting on a brave face? If you're struggling to identify nettle, I'm going to give you a very simple test you can do to actually make sure you've got stinging nettle. Just pick a leaf like this, find a family member, and just rub it on their arm or leg. But anyway, the sting is very beneficial. There's actually studies showing that the sting can be used to treat joint pain. When you have like a joint pain, you can rub it on the area that's aching, and it takes, in my opinion, it just takes your mind off the actual joint pain and puts it onto the new stinging pain. But there is some truth to it. Stinging nettle does have, the sting itself does have beneficial properties. So if you are picking nettle with bare hand like I am today, and I get stung a couple of times, I only got stung once, but you get stung a couple of times, don't be concerned, just think it's actually a good thing. It's funny because when I'm picking all these nettle greens here, I've got like a full dish full of nettle greens. You're thinking, you try so hard to grow lettuce leaves in the main garden, but at the same time there's just an abundance of perennial greens growing, super nutritious greens in the form of nettle just on the sidelines. And the best thing about this is I know these have been grown in a good environment because they're growing in my hen pen. I know the soil quality is really good. I know they've not been sprayed with any chemicals, and I just know they're going to be a really nutritious food without any possible contamination from any outside source. Nettle greens are actually sold in some supermarkets around the world, which shows they are actually a good food to consume, just not that commonly known. And that's the problem. We've got this perception that nettle is a weed you want to get rid of in your garden rather than eat, just simply because it's been labelled as a weed. So that's why nettle is definitely a medicinal plant disguised as a common weed. The next common weed that's actually a medicinal plant is this. I'm surrounded by it right now, and it grows in almost any climate and grows very well in spring. Most people will know that as sticky willy. Well, I did in the past, and now I actually know it's called Cleavers or goosegrass. But if you want to identify it, it's really very simple. You just take a piece like this and then chuck it on someone's back, and if it sticks, you know you've got sticky willy. No, if you want to do more in-depth analysis, it's actually very simple to identify. It has a square stem, and it has red lines running down the stems. The red in itself actually can be used as a natural dye, but this is actually seriously high in antioxidants, and it was traditionally used as a natural detox heading out the winter months. So in the past they used to create tonics or infuse the water with sticky willy Yeah, so they used to put this Cleavers in water and infuse it to create like a tonic as a natural detox to any toxins that build up over the winter months, because like I said, it is very high in antioxidants. So I'm just going to pick some of the Cleavers that are actually growing underneath my blackberry bush. I'm going to infuse it in a jug of water, because that is a really good way, or the easiest way, to actually get the medicinal qualities of the plant. But I wanted to also talk about something pretty interesting about this specific weed. It's actually part of the coffee family, and when it grows a lot bigger and it starts to produce its seed pods and they dry out at the end of the year, you can actually make coffee from this plant, which is pretty amazing. It's very simple to actually do. You'd literally just let the seed pods dry out, and you could gently roast them as well to help them dry out even more, and just grind them up into a coffee powder and use it as a coffee replacement. And it actually does have caffeine in it because it's part of the coffee family. I mean, I'm not a coffee drinker, so I don't know how much caffeine, but I've heard reports of people saying it's actually really nice. It tastes similar to coffee and gives them that little bit of a high that they need from the coffee they drink. So I'm just going to pick some more now to use as an infuser. I'm going to fill it with water, and I'm going to leave it in the fridge overnight and then enjoy some Cleavers infused water. So if you do have sticky willy or Cleavers or goosegrass, whatever you want to call it, in your garden growing, next time instead of pulling it out, perhaps try it in an infused water like this, or even leave it and make coffee from it. So I've been searching for some yarrow, because yarrow is a really medicinal plant and looks very, very similar to this. But after inspecting it, I now know this is poison hemlock. And as you can probably tell by the name, it's a poisonous plant, whereas yarrow is a very medicinal plant. And the reason I know that is because the leaf structure of this one is very different to yarrow. I'll show you what this one looks like. This is poison hemlock. It's a much flatter leaf, whereas yarrow looks like a bit of a fern leaf. And I'll put a picture up of what yarrow leaf looks like. And this highlights the point of how careful you have to be really when you're foraging food. Although you shouldn't be scared of foraging for wild plants, because there's a lot of medicinal plants disguised as weed just out there in nature, but you have to know what you're looking for, and you have to be 100% sure of what you're eating before you actually go and eat it. Because if I was to go and pick this thinking I'm picking yarrow and eat a lot of it, I mean, I don't know how poisonous it actually is, but it's definitely not medicinal, and it could be quite toxic, especially if I actually ate it in high amounts. So I just wanted to make that point clear in this video, because I don't want to inspire you to go out foraging, because it is a really, really good skill to learn, but then just do it unknowingly, going into the dangers of foraging poisonous plants, because there are plants out there that are toxic to a certain degree, and sometimes they can be easily confused with medicinal plants like yarrow and poison hemlock. But anyway, I'm actually going to try and find some yarrow, because yarrow is very medicinal in itself, but it's definitely not this one, because I know for sure that is poison hemlock. So last, but by no means least, is a weed that is so common it's almost in every single country around the world. I'm talking about dandelion. All parts of dandelion are edible. I've got a leaf here which is edible. It can be eaten raw or cooked. The flowers are also edible. They can be eaten raw or cooked. And the root is also edible. It can be made into tea or ground up into a coffee. I've never actually tried the roots, but the leaves I can tell you are extremely bitter, especially when eaten raw like this. But if you want to get like a little bit less bitterness, I would say eat it when they're small, maybe this size or even a little bit smaller, and avoid them when they're getting to a large size. When it comes to the health of this little leaf, dandelion, it's actually pretty incredible. Even compared to plants like kale and spinach in the garden, which we all know are incredibly healthy leafy greens, this actually beats them in a lot of areas. And it's also known for having very high potassium, which is also very important for different parts of your diet and your health. So I've got a nice dandelion plant growing underneath this gooseberry bush that is just starting to fruit now, but they're not quite ready. Hopefully in a few weeks they'll be ready. The dandelion leaves though are actually looking quite good, and they're also quite small as well, which means they're not going to be as bitter to eat. Now, if I was to grow a kale plant underneath this bush here and then just leave it as a weed, everyone would think I was just crazy and just like, why wouldn't you eat that? But for some reason we look at dandelion leaves like just a weed and not even think about eating them. which is pretty interesting considering how common they are and also how they've been given the bad reputation they have among all gardens across the world. If you are looking to forage for some dandelion leaves, it's really important to make sure you choose an area that you know has not been contaminated with any kind of weed killer. Like I know, because it's growing in my own garden next to my other plants, I know I'm taking care of the soil, I'm not spraying any weed killer or pesticides on anything, and it's safe to consume. The last thing you want is to pick some dandelion and then realise you're actually just getting a dose of weed killer. So next time you're in the garden and you come across a dandelion plant, don't just think to yourself, I'm going to get rid of that and pull it out and throw it away. Perhaps pick it and actually eat it. So hopefully this video helps you view weeds a little bit differently, and next time when it comes to weeding your garden, you might think I want to consume that rather than just pull it out and discard it, because some of the plants like I showed you today are actually as healthy as the plants you'd aim to grow. So I hope you found the video interesting. Hopefully it gives you something to think about, and if you did enjoy it, make sure you like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.